Hello and welcome to the jungle. We are here to bring you news, including Austin Hayes signing. Oh wait, that's not this podcast. Anyway, Austin Hayes signed a 1-year deal with the Reds. He'll be an outfielder, which, if you're a Reds fan, you've been hoping for outfielders all off season, and we will be talking about that on other platforms on this network. But as it is, we are a Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Owen Timmerding, thanks for joining me. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great, Seth. I'm happy to, like you said, we're kind of in this little dead period here, but there's still stuff to talk about. We're got a whole new defensive scheme, a whole new defensive crew coming in.
That's right. That's right. So it is all new as far as leadership goes. Al Golden was introduced officially yesterday on Monday, as we're recording on Tuesday the 28th, and he had a lot of good things to say. But one of the things that was originally asked was about familiarity. Zach Taylor wasn't that concerned apparently about familiarity, but he said it kind of plays into it as a bonus. I don't know how much I believe that. I think him knowing Al Golden was probably a pretty big deal, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, and whether he said that or not, the first thing I have written down is familiarity between Al and Zach. Like I talked about this with Tim. I mean, the Bengals are a kind of no risk franchise, and I can respect that. And I think this was the safe play. And regardless of what they say last year with pitcher was safe, and this is safe too. And I appreciate them kind of keeping their guys around, even if it's a different kind of voice.
Yeah, so Al Golden said he enjoyed his time in Cincinnati before, and frankly, you're not wrong about the playing it safe. But on the other side of this, how many guys would want to come to the Bengals to be a
Hmm.
coach? Even 10 years ago, would you leave a lucrative deal at Notre Dame, where you just played in the national championship game, to come coach with the Bengals? So I think there are the old cliches and stereotypes
Hmm.
about the Brown family, about the Bengals as a franchise, but I do believe they're dealing from a position of strength right now
Yeah.
because they do have Joe Burrow and they do have aspirations and the possibility of playing in much bigger, uh, situations like getting back to the Super Bowl.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
it just
yeah,
worked
go
out
ahead.
fine with that, I think. No, sorry, I was just kind of agreeing with what you were saying. Is just it,
Yeah,
like it is different, and I don't know if Golden comes up from Notre Dame in 10 years ago because, like, and I'm sure we'll dig into Joe Burrow helps. He's a recruiter for all sorts of people on this staff, whether
yeah, he
regardless of
is.
what position they're in.
Even without even probably saying anything, just his
Yeah.
presence. Um, and that's the thing. I keep hearing other guys on other shows or even in print talk about how, all you have to do is come in here and be a top 20 defense. It's not as if you
Mhm.
have to be top five. Um, I don't think Al Golden would say, yeah, that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
I think if you're the coaching staff and if you're the players, you aim to be top five or number one, even you aim for that. The luxury in this case is that if you slip down and are only top 20 instead of
Mhm.
28 or 29 or 30, you all of a sudden are in the playoffs and probably making a run. And we'll get to this year's playoffs here in a few minutes. A couple quotes from Al Golden. It starts with a championship culture. He knows about that. He said it's a big business, but it's family run when he was talking about the Brown family. He even brought up, and I think this is interesting because we always look at what's happening and try to label it and things like that. He talked about leaders on the team, and he was with the staff when they went to the Super Bowl and leading up to that. They really focused on drafting and getting former captains, people who played on winning teams in college or even in the free agency. They wanted guys who had been in the playoffs before, and including obviously Logan Wilson being chief among those for Golden's purposes as linebackers coach. So I think that's important. He wants to surround himself with winners, and it's already kind of a proven track record of the way to do things.
Totally. I mean, and that kind of speaks to his player development mantra too, which he kept talking about in the press conferences. Is it's hard to not trust a guy, or I mean, hey, you're in college. Your goal is to get the best guys on the field, kind of no matter what step they are. He talked in his press conference about this onboarding that they kept doing with their freshmen. Notre Dame played a lot of freshmen this year. That
Mm-hmm.
means they trust their guys, and these guys trust their system. I don't necessarily know if Lou played the right guys at certain times over the last couple of seasons. I appreciate the honesty that Golden has already said. It's like, hey, if guys are getting stuff, if they're getting it and they're buying into the system and they're kind of all about what I'm about, they're going to play and they're going to make an instant impact. And his track record shows.
Yeah, and certainly until he absolutely had to, Lou seemed to not want to play young guys, especially in the defensive backfield.
Mhm.
And that maybe was to his detriment at times. Now, the funny thing that was pointed out by Zach Taylor, last game for Al Golden in the NFL was in the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
He left the Bengals staff after that to go to Notre Dame. His last game in a college situation was playing the CFP title game. So pretty good
Yeah.
credentials there. Certainly, he'd like to end this season not only playing in but winning the Super Bowl. He also thanked Marcus Freeman. And here's the interesting one here because we all know how Brian Kelly left
Mhm.
Cincinnati when he left Cincinnati, and even the situation in Notre Dame. We know how sometimes guys just take off. The famous Bobby Petrino when he was with the
Yeah.
Falcons, he basically during the regular season took the job at Arkansas, and he left a printed out note, form letter on every person's locker. So he didn't even say goodbye to his NFL players when he left. But one thing Al Golden said, he said, I knew when we made the decision to come, I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with the Notre Dame players. I thought that was important. He said Marcus Freeman recommended he do it. And I think that says a lot about a guy's character when he knows he's probably going to upset some of these kids, and they are still kind of kids, in my opinion. You're still a kid, in my opinion, from
Yeah.
my age. Um, he knew that could be upsetting news, but at the same time, he faced it head on. So I guess overall, your thoughts on Al Golden? Were you happy with the hire?
Yeah, I was. And it was just kind of like I just liked something new. I think I like the kind of presence he brings. He's kind of like that football guy that I feel like the Bengals haven't had on their coaching staffs. I thought Lou was great. I just kind of like Al Golden's energy. I think he's tough. I really like that he spent time here before because as Cincinnatians, I feel like we all really get behind people that we know care and understand who we are. And he's built a family here. His kids go to school here. It's like being people in this area want people like them. Like, and that's pretty cliche, and I'm sure that goes a long way with a lot of people, but he's relatable. I think he kind of represents what that old Bengals defense kind of culture is about. I just think, I mean, hey, you got to give him the pieces. I think he's obviously really well respected in the football universe. I mean, he's been a head coach at the college level too. He's been up and down between the college and the pros. He obviously knows what he's doing. So I'm skeptical in the fact that like maybe the talent's just not there and we need to totally rework how we're approaching the draft. But I think it's a safe risk.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've said before on this show, it's really unusual to have a staff stay together as long as this one
Mhm.
had before, obviously, last season when the Titans came calling. And so it's unusual for the staff to have been together that long, and it's unusual for a coordinator to be in position that long because
Mm.
usually either he gets fired or he goes and takes a head coaching job somewhere else. Um, so I guess in the end of the day, new voice time was probably
Mhm.
the way to go, and you get new voice with actually old familiarity, which that sometimes works too. That's important to have, like you said, the familiarity. He knows some of these players already, but he also, he says he's so energized by the opportunity. He talked about the training camp starting in like the middle of July last summer for Notre Dame, and they just finished last Monday. And Zach Taylor tried to tell him to take a little break, and he says he
Yeah.
can't. Um, the other thing about, if people are worried about a guy coming from college to the pro ranks, Jeff Hafley just did it this year for Green Bay. He left the head coaching job at Boston College, did a pretty good job. Green Bay went to the playoffs. But also he noted Al Golden did, there's a lot more similarities now than there were 15, 20
Yeah.
years ago between pro and college offenses. Think about there are more running quarterbacks or quarterbacks willing to run now and more offenses tailored toward running quarterbacks. And so, not just a scrambler such as like a Steve Young was or somebody like that.
Mhm.
There's also RPOs are just everywhere now, and they've been. It's one of those things where the NFL is kind of trickling down, but college is kind of trickling up as well, as far as concepts and different things like that. So Golden
Yeah.
kind of knows what he's doing. We've got a little bit of news. You and Tim Daniel broke the Golden news last week with an episode, but In addition to the presser yesterday, it's been announced that they've hired 2 new coaches. Jerry Montgomery will serve as defensive line coach and run game coordinator, and Mike Hodges is going to be the linebackers coach. Now, Montgomery has had similar positions over the years in New England and Green Bay, and I was pretty amazed. Hodges has been in New Orleans the last 8 seasons, and he's an Eastern Illinois guy, which, when you get to know who these coaches are and stuff like that, it became like, oh, okay, yeah. Eastern Illinois, that's where Tony Romo played, but that's where Sean, what's his name, the current Broncos coach,
Peyton.
Yeah, Sean Payton coached or played at Eastern Illinois as well before, and that's kind of how he discovered Romo and brought him to the Cowboys when he was assistant there. So Hodges came to work for Payton in New Orleans, and then he's stuck there for 8 seasons, even after Payton was gone. So that's kind of cool. Other than that, we don't know much about these guys. They joined Jordan Kovacs, safeties coach, and Charles Burks, cornerbacks coach, and Ronnie Regula is on the website as a defensive assistant. Al Golden actually coached with Jordan Kovacs when he was here the first time. Jordan was already on the staff. So pretty cool stuff. Brand new defense coming. What are your thoughts as I watch my Buckeyes play against Notre Dame this past week, and I saw the thought that they may just play man the whole time, and I thought they would not, and it turned out they didn't. I think it was 60-40 zone to man. But what are your thoughts if this Bengals team becomes more of a man-to-man secondary? Is it something you worry about? Is it something that you think can happen with the current personnel?
I'm kind of hopeful, actually, and I think it's because it would allow these younger safeties and corners to kind of showcase their skills. And I talked about this a couple of days ago with some friends. Part of Lou's defense was the strict communication that these safeties and corners had to have, like, really quick. And when we were throwing out like rookies and guys getting hurt and people coming in mid-game, it's just kind of hard to pick up on those things. And honestly, my biggest takeaway from all of this was how valuable Jesse Bates was to the Bengals for however long he was here, because it relies on that safety communication a lot of the time. I like the man-to-man mantra, because hopefully it can kind of unleash Hendrickson even more if we're going to bring some pressure. And maybe that also helps guys like McKinley Jackson and Miles Murphy kind of find their footing to just kind of open up the front 7 right there. And I think guys like Cam Taylor-Britt are talented. I think guys like Dax Hill and oh my God, I'm blanking on his name, DJ Turner, they're great. And when they had those opportunities to kind of be one-on-one, I think they kind of thrived in some instances, especially DJ Turner towards the end of the year before he got hurt. I just think, I'm going to give it 1 year, a year or so. We don't really know what it's going to look like. We don't know what they're going to go for the draft. We expect that it's going to be defensive heavy. I kind of think the Bengals are equipped to be a solid man-to-man team, especially if they can bolster that front 7, helping Hendrickson out as well too.
Well, to your point, when Dax Hill was a safety, they had a lot of communication breakdowns.
Yeah.
Dax was playing really well at corner before he got hurt this year, so I kind of hope we can see him come back and be okay and be really good. And right, Cam Taylor-Britt, if they can get him outside of his own head sometimes, I think he'll be just fine as well. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it works out for everything. As you said, sometimes actually simplifying things makes things easier too.
I agree. And these kids are young.
Yeah. We'll have to see. All right, let's get that out of the way. The coaching hires and Al Golden's presser. I wanted to be just kind of here lamenting the fact that we're a Bengals show with no Bengals to talk about as far as current games. I don't know how you looked at it. I watched the last 2 weekends and thought, yeah, the Bengals should be here. The Bengals could beat the Bills, and the Ravens were unable to. I understand people, especially outside of Cincinnati, would be like, hey, you don't have any right to complain. You didn't make the playoffs, and your defense was terrible. And, yeah, you'd be right about that. But, man, I think we're a Bengals show talking to Bengals fans, and we have a right to whine here a little bit. So, first of all, watching the Chiefs in the Super Bowl is going to be dreadful. I just
Yeah.
don't want to do it anymore, and we're going to do it at least one more time. I couldn't watch the Bills without thinking the Bengals would have at least won up there in that divisional round had they made the playoffs. Um, and then the Chiefs, the game would have taken place between the Bengals and the Chiefs, and they've played that game so many times, and certainly the Bengals defense could be in trouble. But I don't know. I think the Bengals, Joe Burrow is the only active quarterback to beat Mahomes in the
Yeah.
playoffs, and Tom Brady's the only one to ever do it total. So it's not like Mahomes sees much um, by way of losses in the playoffs. You know what they've done so far here, though? They've taken that place of being so good that I don't think Mahomes cares about individual numbers and
Mm.
accolades at this point. So maybe some of the guys there do, but it just feels like they're a team that's just so good. They win games that you don't feel like they should because of how good they are, and they just go out there and win. And it reminds me a little bit of the Patriots when they're in their
Mhm.
run. And one week Brady would throw for 400 yards, the next week a guy would run for 200. It's just whatever Bill Belichick had to do that given week to get the W is what they did. Um, I don't know how you feel as a younger guy watching the Chiefs. We have our
Yeah.
Bengals. The Bengals kind of cloud things because I'm usually the guy that I respect greatness. I respected Tom Brady and the Patriots. I respected the Yankees when they were in the middle of their dynasty. People hated the Yankees. Hey, if the Reds would spend like the Yankees and try like the
Mhm.
Yankees, and even the Dodgers currently, I'm not a huge Dodgers guy certainly, but
Mhm.
I at least respect it. If the Reds
Yeah.
did half of what the Dodgers did, I'd be so happy. So where are you on the Chiefs at this point?
I mean, I still really dislike them in the
Yeah,
fact that I just again, you're right. The Bengals blinders kind of screw with a lot of this because I think about that 22 AFC championship game, how like that probably could have been us in the Super Bowl. And then I just kind of think about these wasted last 2 years. And I don't really, the Burrow injury year, I wouldn't say is a waste, but this past season, I hate being that blunt, but it was a waste.
yeah,
You wasted these incredible seasons. And I, I mean, I'm mad the Bengals didn't make the playoffs because they definitely had the horses on offense, and I tend to agree with like it's just kind of weird. It's annoying because we all know the Bengals are great on hypothetically with this offense, especially, and we see it week in and week out. It was just frustrating. It's just
mhm,
frustrating because at least they could have given all the teams they played a run for their money, and because they were better than Denver, clearly beat them head to head. They had Baltimore on the ropes twice. I think they could have. I mean, they had Kansas City on the ropes in week 3,
yeah, they did.
and it's just I think they could have given Buffalo. They could have exploited their defense a little bit. I just don't. It's just frustrating. I don't. I respect the Chiefs and the fact that they capitalize on your mistakes. And whether or not the refs are a thing, I try not to get aggravated about that because I think it's a waste of time. But it's just frustrating. And here's the thing: there's nothing we can do about it. The Bengals have failed to put themselves in a position these last 2 years to dethrone them. So I think we have ammunition to talk because it is true. Burrow beat him in the playoffs.
Yeah, not only
So,
beat them, but even when Lou didn't have everything working these last couple of years, they held the Chiefs down,
yeah,
scoring wise. So they were right in those games. In fact, they realistically should have won the game in the regular season this year. They showed that play on the 4th and 17, and I'd forgotten how it could have just been a no call. Like
yeah,
it's one thing that it got called and that's how you get beat. You're winning and they're going to have to turn it over on downs. Instead, they get a field goal out of it to beat the Bengals. But then you see the replay again. It's like, well, I've seen so many times refs swallow whistles. In
exactly.
even this past weekend, there was a few non-holding calls that didn't take place when Mahomes would start to scramble out of the pocket. Whatever. It is what it is. Josh Allen had a good game, 22 at
Yeah,
34,
yeah,
37, 2 touchdowns. He played well. And certainly it could have ended up much like you were mentioning the 22 season in the AFC Championship game where the Bengals play fairly well, but they end up losing the game there at the end. Um, you know, the sad thing is, as you pointed out, it's the best, even through 16 games, because we're in 17 now. It's hard to compare. Through 16 games, they were already, I think, the best offense in franchise history. And if not, they're right there with the 88 team, which made it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So you're right. It is a waste, because even as good as we thought Joe Burrow was in 21, 22, and before he got hurt in 23 at times in that little stretch there
Yeah.
after his calf and before he hurt his wrist, even then they didn't always score more than like 24 points.
It
But here you
was,
are
I
this
mean,
year,
yeah.
and some people say, like, remember, like, there's all these times when, well, an offense that's behind all the time is always throwing and trying to get back into games. So you look at the stats later and they look higher. It didn't feel like that a ton. It felt like the Bengals were either just matching scores until they lost, in most games.
And that's why they lost all those one-score games. It's
Yeah.
just because, and I mean, they were playing behind in some games, but
So the
it
Chargers,
feels like,
yeah.
yeah, like in that kind of those stats in that game were probably a little inflated because they were down 3 touchdowns or so. But you see, like the Baltimore games are a great example on just the Bengals defense was terrible,
Mhm.
as we know, but they just kept responding, and it's these. That shows how good an offense is. And the Bengals had a pretty strict identity. You'd see on these strict opening plays in past years, they'd kind of just play with their food until they'd get rolling in the second half. And it'd be a great comeback. And they're up by 2 touchdowns, but they're kind of struggling out of the gate. I think by like week 6, they kind of had this offense down and they were firing on these first plays. And the reason they had to come behind a lot this year is because they couldn't get stops. Like you said, they're playing catch up, and because they're having to carry all the weight. It's just I don't know. It's just frustrating. I wish the Bengals were in the playoffs. I think they're obviously good enough to be in the Super Bowl offensive wise. It's like I don't know. I don't know what to say because the fan in me says they're incredible. And it's hard knowing that with all the faults that they had.
Absolutely. Well, we'll leave it at that, and we'll
Yeah.
know that we just know it was great fun watching Burrow and Chase and Higgins and even Chase Brown, everybody get the job done on offense this year. It was a kind of thing that, and to show my age a little bit, through the 90s, it was just awful. And there's so little to be excited about. And to have this offense that they had, and it goes back to what I said, Joe Burrow's rookie year, even when they weren't winning, with Joe Burrow in the lineup, this team is watchable.
Yeah.
Every week. And that was not always the case.
No.
Late in Marvin Lewis's tenure, throughout the 90s, even in spurts earlier in Marvin Lewis's tenure. So I have to be thankful for that,
Totally.
But at the same time, it's more than that. And I heard Michael Wilbon the other day talking about Lamar Jackson, because some people are still like, well, Lamar will get a title someday. Well, will he? I mean, Dan Marino goes to the Super Bowl in year 1 or year 2 and never goes back.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow goes to the Super Bowl in year 2. Will he ever go back? So we have to hope, and certainly we'll be talking about it all this offseason after the playoffs, after the Super Bowl is over, I should say. Here at the Welcome to the Jungle, we'll be going through a little bit of what we think the needs are as far as what the roster needs. And then certainly within weeks, we'll be into free agency and then draft prep and things like that. And before you know it, we'll be kicking off again next fall. But until then, tune in every week to Welcome to the Jungle. Owen, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate the first time you and I got to rap back and forth. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Seth.
All right. Thank you for tuning in, and please give us a like, review on YouTube and Apple Podcast.